Okay.
Um, uh,
Yeah, so
yep.
hi
Okay, take it
everyone.
away, Iffy. Thanks so much, Iffy.
Hi everyone. Okay, so I'm Ify. I'm an Alaska fellow from Nigeria, a cohort of class 37. Just welcome you all back from the break, and a special welcome to class 39 on your first immersion. It's great seeing you all again, and all thanks to GLL. So before we proceed, I just say that there are three reasons why I look forward to the immersion. Um, and I think I speak for a handful of us. One of the reasons why I look forward to the immersion is one, the food. Yes, the great free food, and I am unapologetic about that. And second is I get to connect with you all like we are doing now. And even though we're doing this virtually, it's still good to see you all again. And the third of reasons why I look forward to the immersion is it affords us the opportunity to learn from global leaders as they share with us their experiences, their insights on their professional journey. And like our dear intern has, already introduced Amy to us. Amy is currently the CEO of Community World Partners. Amy, good to have you join us today. And I think I would say a great segue to start off this conversation is to have you share with us what exactly propelled a career shift, like why the sectorial change, what motivated you to shift from the non-for-profit to the business sector.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you, and I'm excited, and I planted it back to you all because I like conversation as opposed to standing up here and being a talking head. So thank you for the introduction and also just the opportunity to have a real conversation. For me, just to give you a little bit of my journey, I would say I actually started in the private sector, right, and then went into the nonprofit sector. The private sector being news, and then the nonprofit sector, I worked for an international development nonprofit organization. And in some ways you could say I went back to the private sector because Community Wealth Partners is a for-profit business, but I don't really think about it that way. And I think the reason is because as a consulting organization, we are completely mission driven and mission focused, and we serve nonprofit and foundations every day. So I feel like we're very much in the social sector, despite the fact that we were set up as a for-profit consulting business. And just to answer your question about why did I decide to come to Community Wealth Partners and do this work? Quite frankly, it was the perfect blend for me of these worlds. Meaning I knew I wanted to do mission-driven work after I had worked in the nonprofit sector. That was apparently clear, like very apparent and clear to me. And at the same time, I had gone to business school because I felt like there were a set of skills and experiences in business school that could help me do mission-driven work. And so Community Wealth Partners was the perfect opportunity to bring together, I think, my passions about social change and, quite frankly, the business skills that I had learned in business school. And I could apply them, many of them, not all of them, but many of them I could apply to social sector and social change work. So I think for me, I feel like I don't really think about it anymore as like nonprofit versus for-profit or business. It's all just blended together, honestly. And I feel like I live in all of those worlds all the time.
Yeah. Thanks for throwing more light on that. So having experienced both sectors, I know you're saying you don't see it as one being one and one being the other. They've kind of blended for you over time. So having experienced both sectors, what differences or similarities have you noticed between working in those sectors?
Yeah. I think at the time that I started off in the private sector working for a news organization, I will say it felt very money driven, and I didn't feel, quite frankly, the heart and soul of the organization. But I want to be careful in saying that, because while that was my experience, the reality is that I think there are many private sector businesses that have a real heart and soul and sense of mission. I just personally didn't feel that. I started off in a small newsroom in the middle of the country that I felt like there was just a constant need to, please advertisers for our television station to improve ratings. And I didn't go into news to please advertisers and improve ratings. I went into it because I loved connecting with people and telling stories. And the reality is that I didn't find I didn't find that others shared all the time that same feeling and sense. And so I did leave to go into the nonprofit sector and use the skills that I had built to, share stories, tell stories, right? And that's kind of in the marketing and fundraising realm. But I do think that, what we see in so many nonprofits is huge heart and soul inside those organizations. And increasingly, I feel like more private sector businesses too have realized that if you are going to unleash the talent and the potential of the people who work for you, that you need to tap into the heart and soul of those people. And you really have to have that sense of purpose as an organization. So I hope this will continue to change for the better. And quite frankly, the events that we're living through right now with the killings of George Floyd and other Black men and women in our country, I think has, for many private sector businesses too, realized that they have a role. They too have a role. It's not just social sector organizations, but they too have a really important role to play in this. So I think we're going to continue to see the blending of these two worlds, to be honest, and centering kind of humanity, right, in the middle of our organizations, whether we're private sector, for-profit, or whether we're nonprofit.
Yeah, thank you so much for shedding more light on that, and the fact that everyone needs to be accountable for, social impact and whatever difference we want to see in the society, more like social awakening. Thank you very much for throwing light on that. So what advice would you give to a person wanting to take a plunge in the international development field for whatever reason at all? So what advice do you have to give?
Sure. So I only had a brief stint in international development work myself, right? So I worked in international development when I first left the news media business and went into nonprofits, and I worked for an organization for about 3 years. So I think I'm not going to have a broad base of knowledge kind of around that. But the thing that I will share is something that I think is important, whether you're working internationally or domestically. And that is something that we have focused a lot on in recent years at Community Wealth Partners, which is kind of increasing cultural competency. I think that there's a tool that we used at Community Wealth Partners called the Intercultural Development Inventory, which is a globally used tool that allows people to kind of take a survey and assess their own cultural competency. And we used it as a tool with our staff to allow them to take it, but then also to give them some coaching on the back end to use to figure out how they could increase their cultural competency. And I think this was really about cultural competency. To me, fundamentally, is how do you navigate difference? So it doesn't matter whether you are, a man or a woman, white, black, brown, it doesn't matter. We all have to navigate difference in our lives every day. And this, I think, improves your ability, right, by reflecting on kind of various aspects of how you engage with others, kind of how you can do that. So I think, to me, in addition to all the things that anybody would say, which is, get experience and build networks and, read about the field, all those things are true too. But I guess the thing that I feel like I can really speak to, and that speaks to me, and that I think is important, quite frankly, even and particularly, frankly, in our country right now, is how do you navigate across difference and building your skills to do that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that insight. So we know that you've worked with you started out with the private sector and then the not-for-profit, and then in the center of the social impact kind of thing, which you're currently doing. How do you navigate work situations that deal with multi-stakeholders, such as the government, such as the CSOs, social reformers, etc.? How do you create a synergy that promotes a balanced representation?
Yeah, great question. So we do a lot of work at Community Wealth Partners with multi-stakeholder cross-sector collaboratives. And I think that our learnings in that work are probably most relevant to what you're asking. I think having a shared goal is most important. And I think sometimes it takes a while to figure out what that is. What is the thing that, whether you sit in government or a business or a nonprofit, that we all collectively care about and are working toward. And how does that issue, let's say the issue is early childhood education and care. How does that affect you as a business, as a government, as a nonprofit? What is your experience and interaction with that? And while there are lots of early childhood nonprofits that focus on early childhood, it's very clear that early childhood education and care, right,
Mm-hmm.
affects businesses, right? It affects their employees and their employees' abilities to come to work every day and to feel like they are, able to be productive because their kids are cared for, et cetera. So I just think that it is about finding that shared common goal. The other thing that we focus a lot on in those groups is, quite frankly, culture, what I call group culture, is how do you help that group set some principles and norms for how they're going to engage and operate with each other. And I think that's really important because, words like collaboration, right, are big, broad words. And yet somebody who has been sitting in a government role and collaborating in one way, that might look really different than somebody who's been sitting in a business role and collaborating in a different way versus somebody who's been sitting in a nonprofit and collaborating in an even different way. And so I think getting beyond just saying, okay, we're here to collaborate, but no, really, what does collaboration look like between us? That means that we listen to each other even when somebody shares a perspective that's different than our own, right? It gets down to naming some very specific kind of principles or practices, I think, that everybody agrees to help the group engage. There's a lot more that I could say, but I think those are the two things that I think of a lot in terms of initially shared goal and then a common set of kind of operating principles and norms for how you engage with each other so that you're clear about what to expect from your colleagues and what they expect from you.
Okay. All right. So in summary, you kind of look for a shared common goal, and then you also highlight the need to utilize the collaborative tool to help keep the group engaged. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
So one other question we would also like to hear from you is what inspires you to do what you do? I'm sorry. Most times when I get to speak with people, speak with leaders, global leaders, I always, when you see the drive, you see the tenacity, you see the grit, I'm always like intrigued. We always want to know what inspires you to like do what you do, what inspires you to just want to keep pushing and keep getting it together.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot that inspires me. But I will say, just to share a little bit of my personal story that I feel is relevant to that, and then I can come to the kind of present day. But I started off in news, as I said earlier, because I loved meeting new people and telling stories and hearing people's stories. Quite frankly, it was all about connection to people. And I've only realized as an adult that probably a lot of the way that I was raised and the family that I was raised in influenced kind of that desire in me. My parents, I would say, were very much social justice advocates and were very engaged in community and always engaged in communities and connected to communities that were different than our own. So I think of very kind of pivotal experiences as a young person, going and engaging. I lived in Southern California, but we would go to, you know, Utah and Arizona and engage in with the Native American communities. You know, my family sponsored a family that was relocating from Vietnam, relocating here to the United States. And I remember sitting in the apartment of that family and engaging with them. And I think just quite frankly that, you know, those things have an impact on you as a young person. And it kind of inspired me to continue to lean into, I think, kind of, you know, being curious about people who are different than myself and wanting to learn and engage. And so I think to this day, what continues to inspire me are the people that are around me, the team members on our team, who have amazing kind of resilience and, you know, capacity to keep going even when things get hard. You know, other leaders who I see those same things, even when things get hard, they step up and they keep going because, like, as we often say here, community wealth partners, like, the dream is worth it. Even though it's hard, the dream is worth it. And so you got to keep going. And our clients. And there are moments in which, you know, we all struggle or feel like, gosh, are we doing enough to really make the change in the world we want to be making? And other people pick you up because they're continuing to move forward and make that change, right? And I always feel like, you know, we feed off each other, and especially in this moment that feels so hard with the pandemic, and then the most recent events around George Floyd's killing. Like, I feel like things are so hard, and I see it happening every day, even among our team, where it's like one person is down and others inspire them to keep going or support them. And then, you know, it doesn't all come from leaders, right? Like, inspiration doesn't all come from leaders. We all inspire each other, I think, in different moments of the day, and we all need inspiration at different moments. And so I just feel very fortunate and lucky to work with the clients and the partners we work with, and also with the staff that we work with.
All right, then. I just going to pick up something you just, you know, mentioned, and it was more like it's I think it's still a menace. It's more like a health condition that, you know, was affected the world globally, and you know, prior to the current issues that we're facing, the killing of George Floyd, which has also taken over the news, which is very much understandable. The issue of COVID is still it's still a problem. It's still a global problem. And given the significant disruption the pandemic has resulted, how have you as a leader risen above such challenges and adapted to the new normal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm still doing it. So I'm still in it. I'm sure you all have lots of good ideas on that too, because I feel like it evolves every day. You know, in March, when I say when the pandemic hit the United States, but as we now know, it was here before March, but the point at which we really all realized how serious it was here in the United States as well. You know, I think the first thing for us was to really support our team and making sure that our team was safe and had the support they needed. And so when we, you know, immediately instituted a telework policy, et cetera. And then the adapting was around, you know, how do you support people who are teleworking? Some of them for the first time teleworking, you know, 5 days a week. And so, you know, we had to adapt our normal processes and meetings, et cetera, and making sure that we didn't lose those opportunities to have human connection just because we were all in our own homes. And so we created, you know, virtual lunches and virtual, snack times and, you know, different things like that that would replace kind of the informal interaction that you might have in an office place. So I think, you know, I started in my mind first with how do we really ensure that our team has what they need. And to me, that just, I mean, often in these moments, I just kind of lean into my heart, to be honest. Like, that's where I go. It's like, there's another leader the other day who said to me, like, this situation, I think, has called upon all of us to lean into our hearts and pay more attention to matters of the heart than we ever have before. And I think that's a good thing. It gets us reconnected to life and why we live and what matters. So I think that was first. And then on the organizational side, we started doing the same thing. It's like once we could do it for our team, then we were asking our team to do the same thing for the nonprofits and foundations that we work with, in terms of connecting with them and just listening, being there for them, asking them what they need. It may or may not be something that we could help with, but we were there to listen. And that eventually led to us kind of repackaging some of what we do and pivoting some of what we do in order to meet immediate needs. So just to give you a very tangible example, several of the clients that we were doing kind of longer term strategy work with suddenly became overwhelmed with the moment and thought, I don't know if I can do a 5-year strategy right now. Like, I don't even know what's happening next month. And so we pivoted to doing kind of quick scenario planning with them, which was more about strategy in the short term versus strategy in the long term. And so I think it was just about us being willing to, we know how to do strategy work. So being willing to just dive in and pivot and change and not be afraid to do that, to meet people where they are. And for the needs that they had. And of course, we had to do that scenario planning for our own organization too. And my theory around that was to be 100% transparent with our staff and 100% transparent that we had a, in terms of our own organization, had a best and a worst case scenario, and then a moderate one right in the middle. And we shared with them what each of those scenarios were and the assumptions that we made in each scenario. And we said, if we are in our worst case scenario, we'll be letting staff go. If we're in our best case scenario, we won't be. If we're in our moderate, there's a question. And we were completely transparent about that, because I did believe that it was critical for them to know what to expect. They were seeing friends being laid off, so they had the question anyway. And I have the philosophy of being 100% transparent so that the questions don't just sit there and loom and cause anxiety, but they're clear. And they're clear on like how hard we were working to try to keep everybody intact. And the good news is we really have been in a fairly fortunate, good position. And I hope that continues, because it's all very unknown, right? It's all very unknown.
All right, thanks for taking us on that journey from the empathy part of it to the strategy part of it, in terms of what the organization gets to assist other organizations who are struggling with this new normal, which is going to be for God knows how long.
Yeah.
So as the theme of the GLL, the immersion is leading movements, like leading impactful shift. How can we as young social makers lead meaningful and impactful shift in today's world? That's learning from your experience being around.
Yeah, I think my answer to that is to kind of be in tune with your passion and your strengths. And when you follow your passion and strengths, you will make change and you will make a difference. This is kind of, I know, a simplistic philosophy, but it's one that I really believe. And I've doubted that at moments, if I believe it, because I remember once many, many years ago saying to I was saying to somebody about myself, I was like, if I could just I have to make money to earn a living. So I have to have a job, but if I could just find, it's like, my younger self, I was like, if I could just find somebody to pay me to go tell the stories that I wanted to tell, right? Like not working in a newsroom where somebody's telling me what stories I have to cover or what's important, but like connecting with the people that I want to connect with and telling their stories. But I'm like, I don't know who will pay me just to tell the stories that I feel like telling and the people that I meet. And, and I never did quite find that person to pay me so I could support myself and my family to do that. So it sounds like I'm contradicting my own advice, but I still truly do believe that, and I think I found it here at Commute with Partners in a different way. But I think that if you know what your strengths are and how you can contribute, we all bring different strengths and gifts, and to follow those and to follow your passions, you will find a way to make change. It might be a journey that looks a little bit like this, right? I feel like mine very much was, to be honest. Like I was not one of those people who, like, my career followed some really planned out step-by-step methodical process. It was a little bit like, you know, finding where's the place that I can do all the things that I love to do and that I'm passionate about. But I think you follow it and you find it and you keep telling people what you're looking for. And eventually, you know, you land somewhere and you're like, yeah, this is it. And appreciating the journey too. I think appreciating the fact that sometimes you do have experiences that you're like, this is not exactly what I expected, but I think those experiences too teach us about what we want and how we can contribute and what's meaningful for us.
So passion and strength, and more importantly, appreciating the journey, because I think that's a whole lot. Like sometimes we all get swamped in what we are doing exactly or where we are without really embracing and appreciating the whole 9 years of that journey. So thank you so much for bringing that thoughts back to us. So I'm just going to wrap up this, question session from my end to your end before I open it up to the full house.
Sure.
You come with a vast wealth of experience. What advice would you give to your younger self, right? And I'm also taking it back to being kind to yourself and appreciating the journey. What advice would you give to your younger self having climbed up the ladder of success in your endeavors?
Yeah. Well, one is appreciate the journey, as you just reiterated. And I think the second is to let go of I call them the shoulds, you know. I think we all have these little voices in our head, or at least I do. Maybe I'm the only one that has voices in my head, but I've got a lot of voices in my head that tell me things every day that are like, and particularly my younger self, right? You should be doing this. You should be doing that. You should, go to school here. You should go to school there. You should study this. You should, experience that. And I feel like sometimes those shoulds keep us, I think, from just following our heart and our passion, right? And going with, what we instinctually feel is the way that we can contribute in the world or what's right for us. And it just, there's so much noise around us all the time, kind of like trying to tell us what to do. And I think you just got to go inside yourself and inside your heart to figure those things out. And like I said, I wish I had done more of that, because I think but the journey's the journey, right? So it's like, again, going back to like just accepting the journey. But yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Okay. All right, then I'm going to start reading out